got it there. Oh, no. Oh, good evening.
Good morning.
Time is it? 6:33.
Yep.
Hello there.
Let's take a look at some of the newspaper front pages. Well, joining us to go through them today is political consultant Emma Burnell and former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Newsom. Should we start with The Guardian?
Oh, I think we should. Yes.
Going well.
Honestly, it's a nightmare working with this woman. Yeah, The Guardian has hundreds of post office victims who will have convictions overturned within months.
The Daily Telegraph reports on post office investigators being handed cash bonuses for every sub-postmaster and mistress convicted during the Horizon scandal.
No. The Mail focuses on hundreds of postmasters facing a lengthy battle for compensation despite that landmark legislation.
Pressure grows to punish post office scandal firm as victims will be cleared, is the headline on the front of the Eye.
And the Mirror has a campaign hero, Mr Bates, who says payout plans for the wronged post office staff will not make up for the suffering.
Wow.
Well, and it won't. But it's what else do you do? What else can you offer, actually? But there should be, honestly, needs to be some serious money.
Yeah, there does.
With what some of them have been through. Let's see what Dawn and Emma make of all of this, and actually sticking with this story, Dawn, on The Guardian.
Well, it is on the front page of every single newspaper.
Yeah.
Literally every single newspaper, from the Daily Star to the Financial Times. And there are so many questions, aren't there? I mean, finally, bearing in mind this started in 1999.
Yeah, it's 25 years.
25 years, quarter of a century. And there were problems with this computer system, even on its trial run, before it was rolled out nationwide, when two postmasters ran into financial issues that were ignored then, and they still rolled it out. So 25 years on, suddenly, overnight, the government decide that they can do something about it. And I'm sorry, I just think this is the final insult to these people that have suffered for so much. And who the hell, in 2019, when this was actually literally in court, and it was all, this was wrong, this was profoundly wrong, was Paula Vanel's given her gong. At the time this was happening, who made that decision? On what grounds made that decision? And you know what, Stephen? The final insult now is some of the newspapers are calling for Mr Bates, now famous of the TV fame drama, to get a knighthood. If I was him, I would tell them very firmly where to stick that knighthood. Bearing in mind, Paula Vernel's got an award for her terrible behaviour, and Sir Ed Davey, who was in charge at the time and refused to even meet these people, despite 5 letters saying it wouldn't help anything, he was made a knight as well. So if I was Mr Bates, I'm calling him that because that was the title of the drama that's opened all this, isn't it? And the fact that it took a TV programme is still so annoying. But, you know, and to be given a gong, I'm sorry, I'll tell her where to stick it.
Well, he has previously said he wouldn't accept a knighthood from the same system that...
Exactly. Why would he want to be honoured by a system that he has, quite rightly, absolutely no respect for? You know, what is an honour in a system with no honour?
Exactly.
That has to be, you know, and how could anyone who's been through what he's been through, who's watched all his friends go through what they went through, you know, feel any other way? It's just, you know, and it has taken an ITV drama, and it's interesting. So Kevin Holyroke, the person in charge in the government who has you know, been pushing through this emergency legislation, will introduce this emergency legislation, as recently as November last year, said, oh, I'm afraid there's nothing they can do, it just needs to go through the system, blah, blah, blah. Delay, delay, delay. And that has been the Post Office and Fujitsu's tactics throughout this. Delay, deny, obfuscate, throw lawyers at people, and that is a real problem, because I can guarantee you this may be the biggest miscarriage of justice this country has ever seen, but there's something else going on out there that we don't know about, and it shouldn't take another 25 years from that being uncovered to seeing...
It shouldn't, but it's not until these things really hit the public consciousness that politicians sit up and take notice. It was ever thus.
I mean, to be fair, and, you know, there were some politicians, Conservative politicians and Labour politicians, who have been trying to be quite dogged on this, but they were in a minority. You know, it took it bursting into the public consciousness over this sort of New Year drama that basically everyone, I think, watched, for it to have that kind of political impetus. And that shouldn't be the case. And there are too many times when things don't get into the public consciousness but are just wrong that we really need to be looking at.
I think in the... by the way, where was Sir Ed Davey yesterday? He wasn't even in Parliament when this was being discussed and the legislation passed. I'm sorry. The very least you could do was actually be there and listen. But I think one of the SNP politicians made a good point. It's like, how much do politicians actually listen to the little people? They don't. And he listed the Equitable Life scandal, infected blood scandal, Grenfell, Hillsborough. All of these miscarriages of justice are still going on.
And what's the next one? Because all of those that you've listed, they have been going on for decades.
Yes.
And and what worries me is that we've learned nothing. We've learned nothing from Hillsborough. We've learned nothing from infected blood. And these things, it's too easy to incentivise poor behaviour of corporates and poor behaviour of the people who are supposed to oversee these corporations. And that is just wrong.
It's shocking, isn't it? I think if anybody has watched the ITV drama, you'll be struck, really, by how cruel the investigations were by the Post Office into these sub-postmasters and mistresses. And then you got on the Daily Telegraph today, front page, that the Post Office were actually handing out bonuses for convictions, which might go some way to explain why they were being so dogged in their investigations.
I mean, they're actually awarding people for targeting innocent families, because it's not just the postmasters themselves, it's their entire families that have suffered. Their families have been spat at in the street. They've had to leave places they've lived for decades because the people, their friends and neighbours, former friends and neighbours, thought they were stealing from the pensions of the old people living locally. How is 75 grand going to make up for that? Because that's what they're being...
Well, but that's the interim payment.
Interim, absolutely interim.
That's the interim payment, so that's the immediate payment, but then it's how long will it take
Meanwhile,
to get the rest of it?
Yeah, and that's what worries me. 75 grand is all very well, but if that interim payment is a sop because they're going to delay even more. That's what terrifies me.
Well, we need to keep the pressure on.
Yeah. Well, meanwhile, Fujitsu have just been handed a contract extension to flood defences for £19.5 million.
Jesus.
They didn't take 25 years to think about that, did they?
No.
Well, no, well, fine. I mean, we need Fujitsu to be making money because they need to put their hand in the pocket and fork out
for these people.
Yeah, but that's just circular money. It's money from the state going back.
Yeah.
And that's we should not trust Fujitsu as something as vital as our flood defences. I mean, look at the state of the country right now.
If they're in charge, I'm buying an extra bucket, sorry.
Yeah. Well, they've actually been given £6.8 billion in public contracts since
they're running school computers in Northern Ireland as well. Good luck with that one, kids.
And they've been given contracts since 2019 when this all came out. So it's not like the government could say, oh, we didn't know.
They've been managing to keep very quiet on all of this.
Before anyone actually gets in touch and says, well, the media kept very quiet, the media didn't keep very quiet. In Private Eye, actually, and Ian Hislop, to be fair, actually were at the forefront of this, have been campaigning for this since day one. Computer Weekly did a brilliant job. And, the
BBC Panorama.
There was a panorama. This was sort of known in the background for quite some time, but it took that drama, and I think that drama at that moment, when we probably were all post-Christmas sitting on our sofas watching the big 9 p.m. drama, for it to burst into the public consciousness.
Yeah.
One can only be grateful that it has, but we should also question why it's taken so long.
Whose side of the politicians are on? That's what I want to ask. Whose side are they actually on? Are they on theirs or ours? I think I know the answer.
Well, they're looking at... I suppose the issue is they're looking at the bigger picture. Politicians do need to look at a bigger picture, which I totally understand.
What, their bank balance?
No. Don't be that cynical about it. I think but that means that they don't focus on the little people as much as they should.
I mean, I think that's absolutely right, and that is always the tension, particularly in government. You have to, when you're buying things that cost billions of pounds, it is very hard then to go down to a more granular detail. That's not your job. It's not your job to do granular detail at that point. But there does need to be somebody within the system whose job that is, and you need to be listening to them.
Yeah, like if you're Post Office Minister, listening to the
sub-post office.
Absolutely. Emma, let's have a look at the Red Sea shipping attack, because this is actually... I mean, some people are saying, we've averted war, on the brink of war with this attack, because it was so full-on from Houthi rebels in Yemen.
So the Houthi rebels have been attacking various shipping going through this area outside of Yemen in the seas. One of the reasons that shipping has been quite busy there is that it's been harder to use the Suez Canal for various reasons. I think it's at its lowest level for quite some time. And if they are to stop using that lane, they'll have to take a much, much longer route all around the Cape of Good Hope. So this is the best place to get ships, commercial ships usually. But this ship was, I think, a Royal Mail ship that was attacked.
Royal Navy ship.
Royal Navy, so Royal Mail.
No, you've got
I've got the Royal Mail on the brain. A Royal Navy ship that was attacked with drones, and then those were shot down. That's an escalation. That's that's an act of aggression. There are very real worries that the already appalling situation in Gaza and between Gaza and Israel, incredibly complicated, difficult situation, is spilling out further and further into the Middle East, and we're just going to see even more conflagration.
The problem with this is that the Houthi rebels are basically a group of ragtag pirates, but they're backed by Iran.
Yeah.
They're exactly.
Really...
They're ragtag pirates, but they've got a state on their side, which is sort of the opposite of what pirates generally are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the real issue. But it's going to affect the cost of living crisis in this country because at least 2 of the big shipping companies are already diverting their ships away from the Red Sea to go around Africa, delaying products getting to the... And it's not just all about us, obviously, but it is going to affect people in this country. But it is scary. And you've also got Saudi Arabia and Egypt are affected. Obviously, they border the Red Sea, so they're affected by this as well. But what are they doing? I mean, I haven't heard from them. We've got France, we've got America, and we've got our, the UK with warships out there at the moment. But what are the nations surrounding there doing?
I mean, I expect in terms of diplomacy, it's probably better that it's France and the UK than Middle Eastern countries attacking each other, because that really could lead to... Well, World War III.
Well, it's a terrifying thing.
No, it certainly is. Dawn, let's have a look at the front page of the Telegraph, shall we? And this is a new nuclear power station in Britain.
Yes, absolutely, which is good news. Surely it's good news. Britain is to build a nuclear power station with the capacity to power as many as 6 million homes under plans to boost energy security and hit net zero targets. This is the biggest expansion in nuclear power for 70 years, which has been outlined. It's a long-awaited nuclear roadmap. Now, in theory, it's all brilliant, isn't it? I mean, I'm in full-on cynical mode this morning, Stephen, sorry. But it takes a minimum of 5 years. A minimum of 5 years.
It's not going to take 5 years.
It's not. It's a minimum of 5 years.
No nuclear power station anywhere in the world has ever been built on time or on budget.
In theory, it's a minimum of 5 years. Technically, you can do it in 5 years, but we know it's not going to happen. By the time you get the planning permission and all the other issues that go with it, we're talking at least a decade.
Yeah.
So it sounds great. It's good news. We're all going to get cheap energy, but don't hold your breath.
No, I mean, nuclear energy is interesting to me in particular because it's something I've completely done a 180 on.
Yeah.
Growing up, being a unilateralist against nuclear weapons, it was always sort of conflated in the two things. I was anti-nuclear power. But ultimately, if, as I do, you think that climate change is possibly an existential crisis, you have to take the rough with the smooth. So I've decided that nuclear energy is, at the very least, the lesser of two evils and something we should be investing in and should have invested in 10 years ago when Nick Clegg said, oh, we won't do that because it won't be online until 2023. And you're like, well, that would have been nice.
Yeah, that would have been now. I know, I mean, but that doesn't just highlight it? And it might take a decade, but we've just got to crack on with it.
We have to do something.
Absolutely.
Because we can't carry on.
Unless we start now, that 5 to 10 to 15 years will be pushed ever further into the future.
Yeah. Now, there's a bit in the papers today about Keir Starmer and a nanny state, and actually sort of saying, well, I'm all for a nanny state if it helps children's health. But the Press Association reporting now that apparently Labour is planning to introduce supervised toothbrushing in breakfast clubs.
Look, as you say, Stephen, anything that helps kids is a good thing, right? OK, and we know that there are parents out there who struggle to cope through no fault of their own.
But it's taking responsibility away from parents.
I know, however, Stephen, that's the problem. Supervised toothbrushing for young children in free breakfast clubs. Where are the parents? I'm sorry. I mean, there is a thing as parental responsibility, and maybe we need to start educating the parents, not the children. I get that not all parents are, find it easy, and some are struggling. But there has to be an element of taking responsibility for raising your own children.
Yeah.
Well, you say that, but what are you going to do? Because they've closed all the Sure Start centres, which is where they literally were teaching their parents how to do this stuff. The highest...
Why do parents need teaching how to teach their children?
Because for 6 to 10-year-olds, the highest reason for hospitalisation is tooth decay.
Yeah, but why
so it's costing us, the taxpayer, money. So, OK, it would be great if everyone was properly teaching their children how to brush their teeth, and that had been something that was being done. As it's not, no one is saying don't teach your kids to brush their teeth. They're saying here's an extra thing that we're going to do to make sure that we are reducing the incidence of tooth decay in this country. Great.
But they haven't actually explained how they're going to pay for it, which is another thing Labour
not
always
least by reducing those hospitalisation numbers.
That's got a lot to pay for, hasn't it?
Yeah, non-dom tax. I really struggle with this. I really struggle with it, just with the idea that... I struggle with the idea of breakfast clubs. I've got to be honest. Why? Yeah, because, like, why are schools now, got to be open from 7:30 in the morning through till 7:30 at night and providing, breakfast, lunch, dinner half the time. I know in secondary schools that I've worked in, they're providing tampons, deodorants, shower gel, all that. They're literally raising the children. What are the parents doing?
What are the parents
Well, a lot of the parents are broke, and they're working 2 or 3 jobs in order to just put food on the table, and that's what the parents are doing.
You can't make your children brush their teeth.
Well, I mean, no, but brushing the teeth is you're talking about breakfast clubs. I was responding to that particular point. A lot of children are going to school hungry. If you go to school hungry, you are not concentrating properly. It's a vicious cycle. So those kids are getting the education they need.
I agree. I just think breakfast clubs and things of that ilk are it's a sticking plaster. It's not looking at the problem. It's just a quick
absolutely.
solution.
And the problem is that our economy is screwy, and people are not earning enough, and they're not. We are having vast levels of inequality. But OK, you're absolutely right. This isn't the long-term solution, but for now, it's what we have to do, because we can't fail another generation of children.
I feel for the teachers in this as well.
Absolutely. I think that is a big issue. And I think in terms of what is being expected of teachers, I think we need to have a real conversation about that, because we are really struggling to attract teachers into the profession. And part of that is the far, far more additional pressures that are being put on teachers.
Well, they're part social workers now, aren't they? And now they've got responsibility to feed children and brush their teeth.
They're taking parental responsibility.
They are, yeah.
And that's the problem here. I mean, I totally agree with Stephen on this. I mean, I think the poverty issue, yes, it's an issue, but I mean, obviously, back in my day, everyone always says that when you get to a certain age, don't you? But, I mean, my grandparents were incredibly poor, really, working-class background, didn't have any money, but they taught my mum to brush her teeth.
Yeah, and fed her before she went to school.
It's also not new. Like, who didn't have those red tablets that we all had in school to see where your plaque was? So it's not exactly new that we're doing tooth health education in schools.
But that was once a year, not once. Not every
but even so, this is what I'm saying.
Disclosure tablets, were they?
I can't remember they were horrible things, and they left your mouth looking awful.
I remember. Funny enough, I remember Mum and Dad doing it at home with me. I don't remember it at school.
Oh, we definitely did.
I went to school to do maths and English and history.
But you did home ec. That's teaching you how to cook. People would traditionally have said that was a parental responsibility.
Yeah. Well, you will have an opinion at home on that, so do let us know what you think. gbviews@gbnews.com. Should we have a supervised toothbrushing for young children in schools? Emma, there's some stunning pictures, aren't there, of this, the world's biggest cruise ship. It's called the Icon of the Seas. Tell us a bit more about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's just enormous. I have to say, it's my literal nightmare of a holiday.
Oh, really?
I mean, I know people who do cruises and love them, and isn't the world wonderful that we're all so very, very different and interchangeable?
But here we are.
It's absolutely giant.
It's like a city on a ship.
It's like a city on a ship, except without all of the things that you go to a city for, like the landmarks and the interesting...
And the culture.
You sail past the landmarks.
Right past them. But I mean, just the idea of being stuck with people. So let's say you find someone you really don't like and you're stuck on that blooming boat with them, having dinner with them all night, every night.
Well, there's about 6,000
Well,
people on it.
that is also
To be
true.
fair, it's big enough to avoid them, isn't it?
Well,
I
you'd
mean,
think, but how often is it in the city that I live in, of 8 million people, that you run into that one person you really don't want to see?
That's a fair point, yeah.
Sod's law.
It's never struck me as something I'd like to do, but Anne Diamond loves a cruise.
She loves a
doesn't
cruise.
she?
The other
She'd-
thing is, my parents like to go, not on that kind of cruise, they do a sort of Beethoven-based cruise or something like that.
Oh, right.
Up the Danube and stuff. But I'm just like, Mum, Dad, isn't that
That's not a euphemism, Stephen. Stop it.
Isn't that just an absolute germ magnet? Like, you're going to come back with every disease under the sun.
You see, what I quite fancy, I wouldn't go on a big cruise ship, but I would do a river cruise. Quite fancy
Up the
a river-
Danube, love.
Up the Danube.
The Danube.
Go up the
Or the
Danube.
Nile, Nile River
I did do
cruise.
a one-day wine cruise on the Swan River when I was in Australia. That was very nice.
Yeah, but I fancy these river cruises look very nice and very civilised and a bit quieter.
I have to admit, we did do a cruise up the Nile, and it was absolutely fascinating.
Was it?
It was a very small boat, and you get off at 6 o'clock, and you go to like Karnak and all the amazing temples up the Nile, and it was absolutely fascinating.
Did you think about Agatha Christie all the way?
Yeah, I bet.
I was thinking about lots of things. I was learning a lot as well, and that was great. It was very educational. When you got back on the boat, when it was very hot, had a nice cocktail, and then they moved the scenery past. It was fantastic.
Well, you've sold that to me, Dawn. I'll be doing that.
You're going to go up the Danube as well, love.
Yeah, going up the Danube.
Well, now GBNEWS have invented a whole new euphemism.
We were talking earlier on about these hybrid workers moaning that they haven't got, nice spaces. They're basically calling in sick more than ever because they don't want to go back to the office, according to this survey. And the psychologist was saying, you need mixed art in the office to make it all welcoming and beanbags and things. Steve says, I'm a prison officer. I can't work from home. The noise inside on the wings is loud, especially when they fight. The only art we get is graffiti.
And Patrick in Birmingham says society has become more selfish and self-absorbed. We've shifted from workers having rights to workers just deciding what they do. The shift has gone too far, he says.
Actually, I agree with that. Absolutely. Well said, Patrick. OK.
Dawn and Emma,
shall we get a
thank you
check?
very much.
Yes, thank you. Let's get a check on the weather with Alex.